Most people assume that when industrial war arrived in the 20th century, traditional materials and old techniques simply became obsolete. Steel replaced timber, concrete replaced earth, chemistry replaced craft. In some of the harshest climates of Northern Europe, during the most resource-starved years of modern conflict, armies and civilians relied on a method far older than gunpowder to make one of the softest materials in their landscape behave like stone. They did not harden it with synthetic resins or industrial pressure treatment. They hardened it with controlled fire. The method is simple in description and deceptively sophisticated in execution: surface charring. By burning wood deliberately and carefully, northern builders transformed soft pine and spruce into material that resisted rot, insects, and even flame itself. During the Second World War, when steel was scarce, rail lines were cut and chemical preservatives were prioritized for other uses, this old method quietly re-emerged, not as folklore, but as necessity. And what it reveals is not just a clever trick of material science, but, a deeper lesson about preparedness, adaptation, and the way older knowledge resurfaces when systems fail. Before industrial chemistry, northern cultures learned to preserve wood with fire and patience. In Scandinavia and parts of northern Russia, timber has always been both abundant and, vulnerable. Pine and spruce dominate the landscape, but both are susceptible to rot in wet climates. For centuries, builders discovered that lightly charring the outer layer of timber sealed it against moisture and insects. The heat, drives off volatile compounds, collapses surface fibers, and creates a carbonized layer that resists biological decay. This was not crude burning. It actually required timing and restraint. Too little heat, and the effect was, superficial. Too much, and the structural integrity weakened. Builders rotated logs slowly over coals or burned standing posts before driving them into the ground. The resulting surface blackened and hardened, shed water, and slowed rot dramatically. In peacetime, this method coexisted with tar treatments, pine pitch coatings, and eventually chemical preservatives. But it was never entirely abandoned. In rural areas, it remained common knowledge, practical, cheap, and independent of supply chains. That independence would matter later. By the late 1930s and early 1940s, Northern Europe was again under pressure. Finland faced invasion from the Soviet Union. Norway and parts of the Baltic region were drawn into German occupation. The Soviet Union itself fought across vast forested terrain. Timber was everywhere. Industrial chemicals were not. Creosote and pressure-treated lumber required industrial plants, transport capacity, and, stable energy supplies. Wartime disruption meant railways were overloaded, ports blockaded, and manufacturing redirected toward munitions. Armies needed fortifications, observation posts, defensive lines, ammunition storage bridges, and, winter shelters. Softwood was the obvious material, but untreated it would rot quickly in damp soil or freeze-thaw cycles. In Finland's Winter War and Continuation War, field fortifications were often built with locally harvested timber. While not every structure was charred, the practice of burning the base of posts or outer surfaces to increase durability persisted. In static defensive lines, where positions might be held for months or even years, longevity really mattered. The same principle actually appeared in Soviet defensive works. In forested sectors, log bunkers were reinforced with earth and snow, and in some cases the exterior logs were scorched. not for aesthetics, but to reduce moisture penetration and delay rot during extended occupation. The irony is clear. Industrial war with tanks and artillery depended in part on techniques refined in pre-industrial villages. What northern builders understood empirically, modern materials science later confirmed. When wood is charred at controlled temperatures, the outer layer undergoes pyrolysis. Hemicellulose decomposes first, followed by cellulose. Lignin, the structural polymer in wood, becomes more dominant in the remaining char layer. The surface becomes hydrophobic, meaning it repels water more effectively. Insects are less attracted to charred wood because the nutrients they consume are degraded. Fungi that cause rot struggle to penetrate the carbonized layer. And perhaps most counterintuitively, charred wood can be more fire-resistant than untreated wood. The carbon layer insulates the inner structure, slowing combustion. In 20th century conflicts fought in cold, wet climates, these properties were not just theoretical. They were, in fact, practical advantages. A charred log embedded in frozen soil. Well, it lasted longer. A bunker reinforced with treated logs required fewer repairs, and a supply shed built from scorched timber endured seasonal shifts better than one built from raw-cut wood. In conditions where manpower and materials were rationed, durability translated directly into operational stability. In prolonged northern conflicts, durability often mattered more than, say, elegance. Modern audiences, they tend to focus on those decisive battles and sweeping offensives, but honestly, much of 20th century warfare, especially up in the north, involved static lines patrol warfare and, well, months of sheer endurance in some really harsh climates. In these conditions, wood rotting at the base of a defensive structure was not just a minor inconvenience. It actually meant weakened firing positions. It meant increased labor to rebuild, often under the threat of artillery. And, it meant exposure. The Finnish defensive system, known as the Mannerheim Line, included numerous log-based structures that were reinforced with stone and earth. While these weren't universally charred, the knowledge of treating wood for longevity definitely informed their construction practices. Similarly, in Soviet Karelia and along forested fronts, timber bunkers were often semi-permanent installations. What distinguished effective positions was not decorative craftsmanship, but resilience. Structures that could survive damp ground, heavy snow loads, and repeated freeze-thaw cycles required less maintenance and fewer resources diverted from combat operations. In this sense, the northern method of surface charring was part of a broader survival logic, reduced dependency on fragile supply chains, by improving what is locally available. When post-war reconstruction began, industrial production surged. Chemical wood preservatives became standardized. Pressure-treated lumber was marketed as superior and modern. The labor-intensive process of controlled charring seemed, antiquated. Urbanization accelerated, traditional rural knowledge faded. In many places, charred timber became associated with aesthetic experimentation rather than survival utility. The practical reasons for the method were overshadowed by convenience and mass production. But, this shift came with trade-offs. Chemical treatments introduced environmental and health concerns. Industrial systems required centralized facilities and energy inputs. When those systems functioned, the trade-off seemed acceptable. But when they faltered, whether due to war, economic disruption, or disaster, the gap in local self-sufficiency became evident. The forgotten northern method was not inferior, it was decentralized. In recent decades, architects and builders have revived traditional Japanese and Scandinavian charring techniques, sometimes referred to by the Japanese term shosugi-ban, though Northern European methods developed independently. Survivalists and resilience-minded communities have also taken interest. The reason is not nostalgia, it is risk management. Surface charring requires no industrial chemicals, no specialized machinery, and honestly, minimal external inputs. It can be performed with just basic tools and a bit of controlled fire. For homesteaders in wet climates, it offers a really practical, low-tech method of extending the life of fencing, outbuildings, and ground contact posts. In emergency conditions, it provides a way to, improve material performance without waiting for deliveries. For those studying 20th century conflicts, this resurgence offers a broader lesson. When large systems break down, older decentralized methods regain value, not because they are romantic, but simply because they function independently of complex infrastructure. The wars of the North demonstrated this repeatedly. Armies that could adapt to climate with local materials endured longer. Civilians who retained traditional building knowledge rebuilt faster. Northern societies developed the method because their environment demanded it. Wartime conditions revived it because industrial systems could not meet every need. Post-war affluence sidelined it because convenience seemed secure. History shows that such confidence can be temporary. In studying the overlooked material practices of 20th century conflicts, we see how survival often depended less on innovation than on retention of knowledge. The ability to adapt old methods to new pressures determined which communities and units maintained operational stability. Soft wood did not literally become stone, but through disciplined application of heat and understanding of material limits, it became something far closer to permanence than its natural state would allow. That transformation was not magic, it was preparation shaped by environment and preserved through experience. Understanding these methods is not about romanticizing the past. It is about recognizing that resilience is cumulative. Techniques refined in pre-industrial villages influence wartime survival. Wartime necessity preserved knowledge that modern preparedness movements are now rediscovering. If you value this kind of grounded historical analysis, where overlooked material decisions reveal larger truths about endurance and strategy, consider subscribing to The Prepper Historian. Share this video with someone who believes modern solutions have entirely replaced traditional knowledge. History suggests otherwise.